Hello and welcome to a somewhat unexpected video. My original plan for video today was to do two videos, one on HDR photos and one on panoramic photography. To do those well, I wanted to go outside. I had an idea of what I wanted to do, but it is October in Seattle, so it's raining. So fortunately, I have a backup plan for today, and here's that plan. I'm going to talk about the big three of composition. The big three of composition. What is that? I'm glad you asked. Let me tell you. So composition is the way we arrange the elements in our photo frame. So what we point the camera at and how we arrange that in that frame. That's composition. There's lots of elements to use. If you've ever had an art class or a graphic design class, any of the visual arts will use these composition elements. And as I've taught them over the years, I think that there's three that have somewhat superpowers. They're a little stronger than the rest, or if nothing else, if you use them, your photos will be more interesting. They're not a guarantee there'll still be an interesting photo, but they'll be more interesting than if you didn't use them. So here's the list of the big three of composition. Number one. Get closer. Fill the frame. So your subject, whatever you're taking a photo of, get as close as you can to that fits the composition, the story you want to tell. Again, be intentional. Have a sense of meaning, a sense of story you want to tell, and then your subject will determine how close to get for that. So what do I mean? Well, I'll show you some examples. What I did was, on a sunny day a couple weeks ago, I walked around our condo here and took pictures for about an hour. I had this rig, so I had my camera with a phone on top shooting video. So you'll get a first-person perspective of my walk around and what I'm thinking and what I'm doing. And again, the get closer is somewhat my go-to. There's lots of reasons for it. Number one, most people don't do it. So it's an easy way to create photos that are unique, rare, and interesting and different, because not everybody does it. Not everybody remembers to move their feet. The other thing that's powerful about getting closer is you tend to remove distractions in the photo. Other stuff that's in the background, either in focus or out of focus. So it helps reduce distractions, things that pull your eye away from your subject. Another advantage to getting closer is it will help make your photos have, if you want this anyway, which I tend to because it's an easy way to remove distractions too, is it makes your depth of field shallower. So you'll have less in focus the farther away you go from your subject. So it's another way to reduce or eliminate distractions. So there's getting closer. Most people don't do it. So that's automatically different, which creates interest. You reduce distractions or eliminate them by you're so close, there's no room for anything else. And the third, I think, power that this has, getting closer, is it tends to reduce what's in focus in the photo. So again, anything that's farther away from your photo will be out of focus and therefore less distracting. So that's number one of the superpowers. Number two of the composition superpowers is to use an interesting camera perspective. So put your camera in a place that's different. So get lower. That's an easy one. Except for gravity, you got to get back up again. But getting lower is an easy thing. Most people don't do it. If you're uncomfortable, you put your camera in a position where you don't normally put your eye. That creates interest because, again, most people don't do it. Again, you combine this with getting closer. So if you're in an interesting perspective, maybe you're at a funny angle up close, that will help create interest in your photo. Or if you're down low to an eye level perspective of something that's down low, again, that creates interest. If you're uncomfortable, that's a good sign that you might be getting interesting photos, because most people don't get uncomfortable when they're taking their photos. So if you're a little physically uncomfortable because you're working some muscles, you're bending, you're stretching, you're reaching up to put your camera in a position where it normally doesn't go, that's a wonderful way to make more interesting photos. So that's number 2. Put your camera in an interesting perspective, interesting point of view, POV. And then the third superpowered element of composition is rule of thirds. And this is the one I probably use the least for a couple reasons. One, I tend to like symmetry a little bit these days. And number 2 is it needs the most help. If you just use rule of thirds, it will be the least effective in creating an interesting photo if you don't do anything else. If you just take something and just move it off to one side or the other of the third, it's potential. It is more interesting, but again, you got to have an interesting subject, interesting light, and interesting composition to pull that off. Otherwise, it's just off on a side or in a corner. So. But combined with the other 2, you get quite a bit of strength potentially. It does create more interesting compositions, because the thirds, or organizing visual things in thirds, scratches this itch in our brain. Our brains really like it. I'm sure there's psychology studies about this, but we like it. It's just that simple. So here's another reason I use these 3 quite frequently. I love taking photos, but I don't always have the opportunity or energy or time to go to places with fascinating subjects or with amazing light, sunrise, sunset. So in order for me to take photos at almost any time I want, I found using these 3 superpowers will help me be able to make photos out of not anything, but lots of things that we walk by that are beautiful in their own right, but we just don't slow down to see how awesome they can look with a photo. So again, this walk around will hopefully show you a little bit of how I approach this. It was a sunny day, clouds were coming and going, middle of the afternoon, so it's not a landscape photography light. You'll see me work with and against the light, play with shadows, but I hope it's helpful. There's some items of interest for you to learn from, and we'll start that now. Okay, so I thought I'd do a little walkabout around our condo, see what I can find that might be photographically interesting to use as examples of the big 3 of composition. So big 3 are get closer is number 1, number 2 is find interesting perspectives, and then number 3 is what is number 3? Rule of thirds, how appropriate. So let's see what we find. When I was out walking the dog earlier, when I was coming back, I saw this little snail shell. So I want to get closer, and I want to find an interesting perspective. So I'm basically going to put the camera on the ground. Also have my extension tubes on, so I have a very shallow depth of field. And let's see what happens here. So I've got the camera resting on the ground, so that's the interesting perspective part. And I'm really close, I'm about 4 inches away. And I have extension tubes on so that the lens can focus this closely. Normally it wouldn't. So next what I'm going to do is look around at the other stuff. I really like that leaf on the left that's kind of pointing to it. The leaf in front's a little distracting. I might move it just a little bit. Shh, don't tell anyone. All right, so pretty easy. Now, I'm not using rule of thirds in this. The object is in the center of the screen, so I'm just going to click and take a picture there. Do one more just to be safe. If I want to play with rule of thirds a little bit, I can move this over, moving my focus point as well. So now it's on the left third.
I'm going to move this one little leaf in the background too. Oops. See how hard it is to take pictures of non-moving objects? I'm going to bring this close and kind of use it as a foreground if I can. Like right there, yeah. There we go. So there you go. So here's what I'm thinking about when I'm taking this picture. I have a cloudy day, so the light's not doing much. So the subject needs to be interesting, and snail shells are pretty interesting. They're interesting shapes and geometry going on with them. To make an interesting composition, though, in the end, an interesting photo, I need to add interest with composition. For example, if I just do a photo from above, like kind of normal standing height. So I'm just going to take another picture from kind of normal height. Well, I'm actually still kneeling on the ground. I have my lens zoomed to maximum, and it's in this perspective, the snail shell kind of blends into the rocks around it, which is good for camouflage, but not so much for the photo. So the perspective of down low really helps in this case. So here's the street view. Got some interesting clouds, but the light it's giving is variable, so I can't count on it. Sometimes if I can, I'll look for a backlight and see if that does anything interesting. But the light itself is just pretty normal, ordinary, semi-cloudy fall day light. So I need to find subjects that are interesting by themselves, and then they need to work the composition because the light isn't giving me much. So turning around from that little snail shell, there's, I'm not sure what they are, but these little berry looking things. As you can see from just a normal distance, they're kind of a clutter, a mess, but if I can find a pattern, a repetition, some lines that create interest, there might be an interesting photo. So I'm going to hunt for that next. And again, I'm going to get closer. That's the main thing I'm going to do here. Get closer. I'm also down lower, so interesting perspective. And we'll see if we play with rule of thirds at all. Okay, so as I'm wandering around looking at these pods or berries, whatever they are, I noticed this one is kind of in a little bit darker area. And I'm using two leaves in the foreground, two of the stalks from the plant, to kind of create a frame, a blurry element in the foreground out of focus. My aperture is 5.6, let a lot of light in with this lens. I'm zoomed all the way to 135 to get close and reduce distractions, and then my shutter speed is 1/60th of a second. All right, so still in the condo parking lot area. There's my car. And I came across this, there's some leaves, it's fall, and right next to this tree here, this tree branch, and this one single leaf, I want to see what I can do. Again, so compositionally what I'm doing is getting as close as I can. I'm at the minimum focusing distance of this lens, using rule of thirds this time in addition, and the interesting perspective is just kind of at eye level for the leaf. I'm going to try moving around a little bit, see where the photo is, looking at different perspectives. And we'll see if we change anything. I'm using this other branch kind of as a foreground leading line now. And I'm going to go to the right third with the leaf. We'll see how that does. Pretty neat. Next, parking lot leaves. Hashtag fall. Let's see what we can find. See if there's anything here that might make an interesting photo. And I tend to like single leaves, minimalist kind of thing. That's my voice I like to use photographically. And now this leaf, so the light's doing something interesting. I've got some backlight going on here. So I'm going to take advantage of that while I can. Turn my ISO down. And use that backlight. Rule of thirds on the right now. Increase the shadow on the right. Let's go to the left as well. Rule of thirds, lined in the middle. I'm down low for perspective, interesting point of view. And then I'm close, pretty much as close as I can get with this lens. So there we go on that. Now, another thing to do is just do a straight down shot. So that shot has a little more energy, that perspective shot. Let me try and get my microphone cable out of the way. Let's see what this straight down does. So I'm just kind of overhead, still using rule of thirds on the left. Do one on the right. And we'll do one in the middle too, just because we can. And I'll show all those and see what we think. So different stories. The straight down is kind of quiet. Ooh, and the light is changing. The sun went behind a cloud. So take the photos when you can. Ooh, I want to do one more on this leaf. I've just noticed something really cool. It has these almost feather-like extensions on it. So I'm going to pause here and put the extension tubes on and see what I can get with that. Hang on. All right, so now I'm trying to get these little, almost teeth-like parts of the leaf. And the sun is going in and out of the cloud, so it's changing. Photography. I kind of like it. I'll try one from down low. So it doesn't really look like it's doing much as far as showing those. Oh, that's kind of cool. I can be wrong. All right. For this next little sequence, I thought I'd show you how your focal length can change the photo in very dramatic ways. So in this case, I'm at 18 millimeters, and if I saw this little bunch of flowers on this green plant, I don't know plant names. Anyway, and I'm just going to take a picture from 18 millimeters. And the downside to doing that is 18 millimeters tends to have a lot in focus. It shows a wider scene. So I've got the silver car in behind it. I've got some other trees and a red car. So if I zoom with my lens, and I haven't moved my feet, I have to back up just a little bit to get it in focus, and take another picture. It's pretty amazing. This is at 135 millimeters. So all I did was just change the lens I'm using. And it's a dramatically different photo. Just to the right of where I just was is this hole in the wood, this little bit of rot where there's a hole in the wood, and we got some different colors from the older inside of the wood. So I'm just going to take a picture like this. I'm just going to do kind of like standing height, and we'll have the bushes coming through on the left, the leaves, and then it's kind of empty on the right, and this hole will be the middle point. So I kind of like that. Let me back up a little more. It's simple. It's kind of artsy-fartsy maybe. Because my tendency is to want to go zoom in and move my feet even more and just really make it all about that, the hole in the wood. We'll do one of those. So I'm straight on, down low, well, eye level with the wood hole. Let's go angle, let's try that. Not sure I like it, but we'll take the picture. Sun's coming out. Sun. And there we go. We'll see which one we like best of that little sequence. So yeah, there's a whole lot of possibilities in one spot. Lots of different compositions through a combination moving feet, moving camera position up and down, changing focal length in the lens. For this next photo of these, I think it's a juniper branch poking out of the fence. I'm going to try looking straight up at it. So I'm kind of shooting blind. I don't know what I'm getting. Let's see if I got it. Missed it. We'll try again. Nope, missed again. Well, I can't see where I'm focusing, so we'll try again. Well, it took a while, but I finally got it. So it is fall. I'm gonna wander a little farther on and head towards those red trees and see if there's any compositions. There's a lot of distractions around them. It's right by a wetlands and a fence. So in order to get, at least for me, interesting photos, I'm gonna need to get closer, and we'll see what happens over there. As you can see, the sun is coming and going. So we'll see what happens when we get over there. So I think this is a good example of something that's kind of pretty. So the line of trees there, even with the kind of dead branches and different colors. But if you take a picture from here, wide angle, there's so many distractions. So don't take the picture. It's pretty sky, pretty day, good to look at, but not really photogenic. So I've got this tree. I don't know tree names either. Sorry. And the sun's out again. So an easy thing to do, easy perspective for interesting point of view, is just to put your camera literally right up against the trunk of the tree, and then kind of tilt and angle, maybe zoom a little bit till you find the interesting composition. Take a click, move around a little bit, try a couple more. For the next shot, I'm going to use the light a little bit. It's backlighting these leaves kind of cool, so you can see the veins and everything, the texture. And I'm just going to move around a little bit. Getting close, we'll click, do a couple clicks, and if I get it just so, I should get a little lens flare or a little something going on. Kind of cool. It's not awesome. Maybe phone wallpaper, maybe not. So from an interesting perspective point of view, a couple of things I'm doing here. I'm looking up, also putting the light behind the subject, letting the, so you get a different feeling. Usually we're used to looking at the light in front of the subject. So you get different, effects with the light behind your subject. So that can be a point of view as well, with the light behind your subject. So I crossed the street to another tree with a few orange and golden leaves on it, and I saw this one, here comes the sun again, with this single cool shaped leaf all by itself. And it's got cool buds right below it. So I'm zoomed in close to it. I'm using right thirds, blurring the background with aperture of 5.6, shutter speed 2000. Click. And what I'm doing is I'm trying to position this against the background so it's against a clean spot. And I'm going to show another photo. I'm going to take my aperture to f11 and show you what that looks like with a little more in focus background, and how the difference of choice of aperture, especially what's in focus, changes the composition. So for this photo, I'm going to do something a little different. Well, it's different for me. It's a pretty cloud. It's not stupendous, and it's middle of the day, so it's, again, the lights, it's nice. It's nice to be out, not nice to photograph. And what I'm going to do is use some of these tree branches to the left and crop off the houses below. There they are. And you see the top of the trees to kind of create context for this cloud. Not great, but different ways you can play with foreground elements to give context, framing, and even a little bit of different interest into objects that are farther away. So now we are upon this beautiful red tree. But unfortunately, it's in suburbia on this yucky bark. Hey, there I am again. And there's a fence there. There's crud behind it. It's hard to take an interesting picture of this in total. So if I back up, you'll see electrical boxes, other trees, a lot of times cars. So what I'm going to do is find some details in this tree. And looking for details, getting closer, it's my go-to. It works so many times in places you can't normally take a picture without a lot of distractions. It just works really, really well. So I'm going to hunt around here for some images, some details, and we'll see what we find. Got this little batch of leaves right here. Got a lot of cool light on it. Let's see what that looks like. Zoomed in pretty close. Also close with my feet. Put the closest one in the left third. A little bit of an angle here. Shutter speed's at 4,000 because it's so bright. I'm making it a little darker in my viewfinder than what it looks like because I like that drama. So let's see what else we've got. Maybe something with the bark on the tree. Something looking up. You just got to spend some time. And even if you don't find an image, it's fun, especially when it's not raining. It's a fun way to spend an afternoon walking around instead of being in front of the computer or the TV. At least it is for me. I tend to do too much of that. All right, let's see what else we got. So I'm using these other leaves to maybe frame the front. It's not quite working, so I'm not going to even take a picture. See if there's a better angle of that idea. Not really seeing one. So we're going to walk around, but I'm going to pause you for a minute. The sun's gone behind a bit of a cloud, and I'm just going to take a picture to show you how different this tree looks like from the back. So it's backlit by the sun. And it just looks black. There's no color. And let's spin around to the front. So here's the other side of the tree, this, with the sun lighting it. A lot more red. So here's another photo where I'm just taking a picture of clouds, but I'm using these bushes in the foreground, this tree leaves and a bush on the right, tree leaves on the left, as a little bit of framing elements. Again, it's not a super fancy photo. It's kind of pretty, but you can use other elements to help tell the story of the main part of your image. Another leaf on black asphalt. Let's see what we got. Where do we go? Let's see, we'll do the yellow stripe in the middle and the leaf in the right third. We'll do one with the leaf in the middle and the stripe on the left third, just from straight overhead. And then we'll try one from down low, see what that does. So what getting down low does, totally changes the perspective and energy of the photo. So you can decide which one you like better. So I found another leaf. This one more curled up with a big long shadow. And a couple other leaves right next to it. So there's this trio here. And so you got some repetition that creates story, maybe creates interest, there's relationship. So composition, changing the story. I'm trying from down low with just the leaf in focus, the foreground main one. I'll just do that, and then we'll just try one kind of from straight above, see what that looks like. So I'll do a wide shot, not too wide because my foot's in this shot. So on a day like today with broken clouds and sun coming and going, the light itself isn't that interesting. It's not sunrise or sunset, but the position of the light relative to your subject can create some interesting stuff. So backlighting, shadows, things like that's good stuff to pay attention to.
So I hope you found that walk around Sammamish taking photos of ordinary subjects in pretty much ordinary light, using the big three of composition, that there's some good information and maybe even inspirational elements there for you. I use these big three all the time, and here's why. for lots of reasons. I don't go very often to exotic places and take photos at sunrise and sunset. I don't even get off the couch a lot of times and take sunrise and sunset photos just down the road where we have a beautiful vista. But I still want to take photos. And so for me, the way I do this is I kind of developed this recipe, this process of finding ordinary things that we walk by that have a visual element that's interesting, and then by combining with maybe getting closer, positioning the camera with an interesting point of view, and using the rule of thirds, all of a sudden I can make interesting photos almost any time out of lots and lots of things. So all of this was inspired a number of years ago by a photographer named Chase Jarvis. His first book was called The Best Camera. That's what it's called, The Best Camera. And the best camera is the one that's with you. And it was shot with his first generation iPhone. So there's a line in his book where he says, I believe that you can make interesting photos within 10 yards, 30 feet, wherever you are. And I really took that to as a challenge to think about how can I, no matter where I am, have a different perspective and look at things differently. And then finding a different perspective for the camera and getting closer, and again, using rule of thirds. So combining all this stuff allows me to take photos just about any time of most things. I'm pretty confident I can make an interesting photo if I have enough time and interest to work it. So I hope that's been a little inspirational and helpful. I'd love to see your photos that you take as a result of thinking about these things and trying them on your own. So please leave a comment with a link to your photos, and I'd be glad to take a look at those. Thanks for sharing. I look forward to seeing you again on this channel, and I hope you have an awesome time working to take more interesting photos. Take care.